Dansby Swanson chose the Cubs because he thought they would win. We break down the Cubs' new player and more right now.
Are Locked On Cubs, your daily Chicago Cubs podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Alongside Sam Olber, I'm Matt Cozy, and this is Locked On Cubs, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day. Please support the show and be a part of the Locked On Cubs community by following and subscribing on all audio platforms. And you can watch, subscribe, and leave a comment on YouTube. Thanks so much for making us your first listen. Sam and I are lifelong fans, taking our passion into a discussion with you on all things Cubs. Today's Wednesday episode is brought to you by FanDuel Sportsbook, the official sportsbook partner of Locked On. Make every moment more with FanDuel. Visit FanDuel.com/LockedOn today to get started. Opening day is 15 days away as we near closer and closer and closer, Sam. And as we start to break down players individually and zoom in a little bit on who we think are going to be big pieces, you best believe that Dansby Swanson is one of those, perhaps even you could venture to say a new face of the franchise. And Swanson and the Cubs have gotten a sizable amount of coverage in both local and national media. Just in the last 2 weeks, Swanson has been the main part of a feature story on either himself or as a preview of the Cubs for the season or both. Places like the New York Times, New York Post, MLB Network, Sirius XM, and more. And the main thread really, like it was at his intro press conference, is Swanson's desire to win. And it's good ultimately that he is aboard for this season and beyond.
Yeah, it is. I think there's two things that I think are important with Swanson. I think there's two perspectives to hit. One of them is that he is a winner and he is going to help your team win. How is he going to do that? By playing really good defense, by hopefully hitting the ball out of the ballpark and putting together an above average offensive season, by making the right plays, by being a leader. Very similar to Nico Horner in terms of his intangibles. However, I think it is really important for Cubs fans and even yourself who just mentioned it, no, Dansby Swanson is not a face of a franchise type player. That is not who he is. And I think that is where Cubs fans could get themselves in trouble with expectations because they're going to say, hey, we gave $177 million to a guy who's hitting 264. That's not who he is. Dansby Swanson, here's the word for word, overly literal definition of what he brings. He is a very important piece to a championship winning team. In Atlanta, he was the shortstop for that team. But that team, now granted, Ronald Acuna was hurt, but the faces of that franchise were Freddie Freeman, Ronald Acuna, Max Fried was outstanding, right? Dansby Swanson was the next tier of guy. I don't think this Cubs team, one of the great conversations about that I've had with multiple people this offseason is people say, well, who is the Cubs face of the franchise? They don't have one right now. And by the way, that's okay. That's okay. Their face of their franchise is going to be a team. And many guys building. This isn't a Chris Bryant situation. Maybe that face of the franchise is PCA. Maybe it's Alcantara. Maybe it's somebody. Even if they sign Carlos Correa, just because somebody is the best player on a team, in my opinion, doesn't make them the face of the franchise. The face of the franchise is, hey, you say Angels, I say Trout Ohtani. You say Astros, I say Altuve. That's the
automatic.
face of, yeah, that's the face of a franchise. We're not there with Swanson yet. So, but that doesn't matter. He is a winning asset and a very important asset on and off the field.
And he was a national champion at Vanderbilt, World Series champ with the Braves. During the free agent process, he expressed his need to join a team that had a winning plan. I think that part is what piques my interest a
Yeah,
lot.
absolutely.
And in Heyman's piece in the New York Post, Swanson admits he wasn't sure at first about the Cubs, but eventually decided that they were the best fit. And I have always appreciated, the desire to build something that's, bigger than yourself. And he had a similar quote in that piece with Heyman. And maybe he's not the face of the franchise, and maybe the Cubs are in this position of open waters, and truly, I do think they are. I think upon reflection, they're in this in between spot where, okay, the marketing team walks down the hall, and I'm not saying that these are all the reasons why. Of course, there's baseball reasons, but who do you put up there? Because we're going to talk about Ian Happ later in the show. You don't put him up there. He's in his walk year.
Yeah, I think
Nico Horner is still early in his process. Swanson just got here.
yeah,
Which I think, the slogan speaks a lot to that for the year. Next starts here.
yeah,
What does that even mean?
right. It's game on. Game on's the slogan.
Right. So it's interesting in that from those angles. Freddie Freeman had some great quotes to The Athletic the other day about Swanson, about being a shortstop and playing all 162, and basically just said that's special, and
Yeah.
it is. His durability has been impressive, and for where the game is going, whether it's pace of play, no shifting, bigger bases, I do think that the Cubs locking him up, was ultimately, and of course we'll see, but ultimately projection wise, a solid move. And I know that their systems internally say he's likely going to stay at short the longest of any other those other guys this offseason.
Yeah.
But I'm excited to see how he fits in here. And when the real baseball starts, him and Horner combining, I think it's something to be towards the top of the list this year.
Yeah, and I mean, look, everybody has their own definition of the face of the franchise. I don't want to be too literal with it. In your example, who do they put up there? Yeah, it's Swanson and Horner. But to me, the guy who's the poster, because the marketing team has to put something together, that doesn't mean you're the face of the franchise. To me, the face of the franchise is a superstar, a guy that you just think about when you associate Albert Pujols with the Cardinals and Aaron Judge with the Yankees back, Pujols obviously.
Yeah, great examples. Yeah.
Yeah. So I don't think we're there yet, but yes, for this current team, it's going to probably be those two guys. I think that pairing, that winning baseball pairing, that defense it's just about winning. Do you know what I mean? Like I just think Swanson's one of those guys, and I know some people are concerned about his numbers right now, and I get it. It's PTSD from Jason Hayward, right? Guy from the Braves, you sign him after he has his best offensive year, great defense, but the offense has always had questions, and he's already off to a rough start. But it's just about winning. And if he hits 255 and we win 90 games, then great. I'm really excited to see the day-to-day contributions he and Horner bring defensively and with their intangibles and just about caring every day. I think that's a big part of it. And, like I said, to me, if you're asking me to categorize who Dansby Swanson is and what that signing is, it's a premium position at a championship asset at a premium position. So that's how I would do it.
And does his power surge continue or even increase? Playing now 81 ball games at Wrigley, it's a reminder that Swanson, 25 homers last year, 27 and 21. He has hit for a ton of power. And I do wonder if that number could start with a 3.
30 is obviously the goal, but you never can underestimate Aprils at Wrigley Field. It's like playing in Ebbets Field. Whatever that really big stadium was in Brooklyn, Ebbets Field, or whatever it was. Anyway.
All right, so interesting times on the north side, and
the Polo Grounds. That's what I'm thinking of.
Oh, the Polo Grounds, very good. Yeah. Swanson is going to be here for the next 7 years. Ian Happ might only be here for the next 7 months. And The Athletic recently did a series on players entering their walk years. We're
Yeah, I
going to
saw this.
dissect that and discuss possible figures for him
Yeah.
coming up next. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel, the number one sports book in America. And new customers get a no sweat first bet up to $1,000. That's bonus bets back if your first bet doesn't win. Just download the FanDuel Sportsbook app. It's safe, secure, and super easy to use. And you can bet on everything from the money line to point scores, point spreads, and more. And March Madness is upon us. We have some play-in games right now. And, of course, the first round Thursday, Friday, second round later this weekend, Saturday, Sunday. Find all the latest lines and trends on the FanDuel app. Plus, FanDuel even lets you combine your bets for a chance at a bigger payout with the same game parlay. So don't miss the chance to get your no sweat first bet up to $1,000 in bonus bets when you go to FanDuel.com/locked-on. That's FanDuel.com/locked-on. Make every moment more with FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of Locked On Cubs. Welcome back to Locked On Cubs. Thanks for making us your first listen every day. And pleased to be with you whenever and wherever you may be listening here on a Wednesday as we're just rolling along here. First, it was the off season. Now it's spring training. And before you know it, we're going to be doing shows again in and out of real live baseball games. Very exciting.
Can't wait to do my 1-minute recaps of every game on our site too. People,
that's
check
right.
those out. Yeah, people have to check those out.
And do we put those up as YouTube shorts? Anyway, we're not going to have a production meeting on the air.
And by the way, congratulations! I believe this is a 2-year, no, I think a 3-year anniversary from when you had Mr. Spiegel on Eavesdrop.
Oh, very nice. Yes,
Yeah.
my first ever podcast, Eavesdrop.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think Matt Spiegel was right around this time in 2021.
I got a Facebook memory today where I where I reposted your episode. That's how I
Oh,
knew
wow.
that. Yeah.
Thank you for mentioning that.
Yeah, no problem.
Yeah, that was the last ever Eavesdrop episode.
Yeah.
And
I was on that show, by the way.
Yes, that's where it all started, you
Yeah.
might say.
Yeah.
The Athletic is doing a series on players entering their walk year and what it would take to sign them to an extension in the next couple of weeks.
Yeah.
For Ian Happ, they sized him up, Sam, using Nick Castellanos, who recently was a free agent. Quote, Happ achieves that WAR differently than Castellanos, and teams are likelier to spend for Castellanos' big-time offense, undercut by poor defense than Happ's more moderate skill set. Happ is a better corner outfielder than Castellanos, but it's become tougher to squint to see him playing much time in center field anymore. So let's set Happ's free agent years a touch below Castellanos' open market deal to about 18 M's per season. Add on the salary for this year, and you can get a 6-year, $100 million deal, close quote. Would you do the 6 years for 100 M's
No,
today?
not for the Cubs. For another team, yes. And let me just disagree wholeheartedly with the Athletic. I think it's a very poor comp. Castellanos and Ian Happ couldn't be more different players. Castellanos has the hit tool. He's a contact hit guy and a terrible outfielder. Happ, as they mentioned, is a much more balanced skill set, better outfield, but also a different type of approach. The comparison and deal, look no further than diagonal. If you're playing left at Wrigley Field, it's Seiya Suzuki.
Oh, wow.
That's the comparison. I believe Seiya, when you include the posting fee, was 5 years, 100.
Right.
I believe Happ should be seeking that. I believe he will get that elsewhere or something along those lines. And listen, the extension's not going to happen because let's say the Cubs offer him 5 years, 100, which they won't. They'll probably offer him something like 5 years, 75, 5 years, 80. So, something along the Benintendi lines is what they'll offer him.
It's a good comp.
But let's say they even offer him 5 years, 100. If Ian Happ just has a very decent year by his standards, so let's just say very similar to last year, which I'm sure he expects, he will get that and probably even a tad more in the open market with the way the market spiked last year. So he's not going to accept a deal like that. So that's why I just don't expect an extension. It just doesn't make sense. for either side right now, for either side. The only way I expect an extension, or the only way I expect Ian Happ back next year, is not what any fans want, and that is if he really struggles. And if he really were to struggle this year, he probably takes like a Bellinger type trial deal with the Cubs to see if he can get his value back up. But you got to remember, the Cubs feel pretty good about some of their outfield spots that they have coming, and Ian Happ wants to get paid. Ian Happ is the type of player, and no issues towards him for this. I think he wants to get as much money as possible, and I think there are other teams that have a greater need and will give Ian Happ a 6-year, $110 million deal if he makes another All-Star team this year, that the Cubs don't feel like they want to give. But to answer your question, I think the comparison is the Suzuki deal. They're very similar players, both pretty good defensively, both like to take their walks offensively. They're moderate skill sets. Obviously, Happ's more proven than Suzuki at the big league level. But that's the type of comp and type of deal, right in that $500-600 million range. So I think they got to the right number. Just I wasn't a huge fan of the journey there.
Yeah, and it's weird because in their own response, they confirmed the differences in Happ and Castellanos, but for some reason they still chose to
Castellanos
comp him.
and they described it perfectly. Castellanos is the type of guy you're paying for one skill, and it didn't work out for them last year until the postseason.
And his power was paltry as well.
Right. Happ, you're paying for just kind of the whole package. 280,
Right.
25 bombs, solid left field, take your walks, and make a lot of outs with runners in scoring position.
Yeah, well, hopefully that changes this campaign.
Yeah, hopefully.
And personally, I am skittish on the 5 or 6 years for 100 M's.
No,
I would not do that.
There's been bigger needs.
I think it's irresponsible.
Yeah.
And I do think, though, a team will do that. And I just see the Yankees being a logical fit for him. And I still think that if everybody on the planet knows this situation, I do think there is potentially a path.
I don't think my mom knows the situation, but I understand what you mean.
In which the Cubs have success this year. And Happ still gets sold at the deadline.
Say that one more time.
So I think there's a scenario that exists where the Cubs are in contention in July towards the deadline, and Happ is still traded. I really do, and I think it would be a really creative deal because you would get players that would help you towards the path to the postseason. Still, I think maybe only a Yankees-like club would do that.
Yeah.
But I think that's definitely something that I've started to wrap my mind around.
I think you're right, but the question with that statement is define success. If he's the best player on the team and he's the biggest reason that they are successful, which is very possible, I don't think they do that to the fan base and to the team. I don't think because you got to remember, last year, they wanted to shop Ian Happ, and he was having a good year, and there was nothing that they liked in return. Nothing. So you got to remember, if he's in his walk year, that now you have even less leverage than you did last year, right? And so let's just hypothetically say around July, they're a game out of first, which would be terrific, and he is the best guy on the team. They're not going to knock down that team just to get themselves a small asset in return at the deadline. Because you got to remember, the team trading for him, Matt, isn't going to give up much unless they have some sort of inside info that they're for sure going to extend him, right? So I don't think it's going to be he would have to be having a success year, but more laying in the weeds. Because, it's like with Couture, let's take the comp pick and move on.
Coming up next, we get an update on a Cubs top prospect who should return by the summer. Find out straight ahead. Welcome back into Locked On Cubs. Thanks so much for making us your first listen every day. Alexander Canario hit 37 home runs across 3 levels in 2022 as he went toe-to-toe with teammate Matt Mervis as the race for Cubs minor league home run king went down to the final day of the season last fall. Unfortunately, Canario in a winter league game fractured his ankle, dislocated his shoulder. This was all on a freak play running to first base. The good news is, though, is we're now here in mid-March. The recovery and rehab process is going well. This is according to Marquee. And he might start baseball activities this week, possibly positioning himself, Sam, for a June or July return. I know Canario is your guy. You'd be excited to see him whenever that is.
Yeah, I didn't realize how serious the injury was until maybe a month or two ago. So I hope he comes back. I think he's a sneaky, really good piece. We'll see how he comes back from this injury. I thought he had a breakout year last year. I think he's got as much natural power as anybody in the organization, and he'll be a guy in midsummer. I'm glad he's going to get some time to watch because you don't want him to turn into kind of an Amaya type of thing where he keeps getting these injuries over and over again. So hopefully he can finish the year strong.
Be sure to hit that subscribe button for Locked On Cubs on YouTube and smash the like button on all your favorite Locked On Cubs content in your ears, Apple, Spotify, Amazon Music, and wherever you get your pods on the audio side. And you can drop us a text, or as we featured on Tuesday's episode, leave us a voicemail, 312-834-4634. Thanks so much for making us your first listen every day. Now make your second, the Locked On Fantasy Baseball podcast. Win your league by listening to Matt and Dom on Locked On Fantasy Baseball every day as they bring you the best fantasy draft strategies. He's Sam Olber. I'm Matt Cozy. This is Locked On Cubs.